All right. Well, at least we know Christie was in the state. He was longer. I think we're going to have to give him some overtime pay. We heard his state of the state, but I really didn't hear anything how the state of this state is. I saw him talk about first how he inherited this state, but what he lacks to say is the state today has a $10.2 billion structural deficit, not much different than when he came in. What I do know that 8 out of 10 school districts are receiving less money today than they were in fiscal year 10, the year before he got here. I heard him talk about giving a tax cut or getting rid of the estate tax that we actually have talked about raising the bar on that and phasing it out because of the unfairness of it. But in reality, that tax hits at the higher echelon of people. He didn't talk about the crisis that we have, our transportation trust fund, how we were going to fund that, something that we have talked about. That should have been a framework that what he should have been laying out there. He did take credit for pension reform, $120 billion. Didn't say it was supposed to be over 30 years, but again, you had to pay into that. He railed against the pension resolution, and how to pay for it, but that he has not looked at, apparently, that document. That document talks about spreading it out over 5 years. The first payment is equal to what is in this year's budget. So it actually spreads it out to give some time to be able to, the economy to catch up. We have to make our pension payments because if we don't, our economy is not helped because we've been downgraded 9 times under this governor. There is so much more that we needed to talk about. He talks about 115 tax hikes before he got here. He's using every single penny of those, but he's talking about not raising taxes. He hasn't while he's here. But what he hasn't said, property taxes, when I checked, went from about $6,000 to over $8,000 and some odd dollars. That's 30% hike on property taxes under his administration. So that is a tax hike on properties that in the state of New Jersey, obviously everybody knows is number one. He didn't talk about transportation, how mass transit was just raised 9% on top of 22% that was the largest about 5 years ago, 30-something percent for the people that most need that to get to their work. So I didn't see a lot of things that he talked about. How do we fix them? What is the state of the state actually? He railed on one piece, on the pension piece, that we have to make those payments, that's important. And then he talked about some other good things, about drug prevention, certain things that it's very important because there is an epidemic in this country. Obviously, Shavonda comes from Patterson. We have a problem here. So those are good things we have to do. But how do we do this? I guess the focus of not really being here, maybe that may be part of it. So I tell you, for me, I didn't get much of it as a state of the state, as just lecturing and pandering, talking about money being taken from unions in reference for an exchange for something. Listen, I'll ask you this. Let me see what type of contributions he gets from big businesses that he wants to give tax cuts to. So let's put, call a spade a spade. Let's see where we are. I'll let Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker. There's a lot wrong with this speech. The governor's speech today was Chris Christie at his best. It was Chris Christie running for president. His audience was not the people of New Jersey. The people of New Jersey have seen through this over the last 6 years. This is a national audience, people that are not familiar with our crisis. They are not familiar with the problems that we face. He references from almost a decade ago, roughly 115 tax increases. He hasn't eliminated any of them. Spends every penny of every one of them. Ignores the fact that they were raised to deal with coming out of the last fiscal crisis left behind by the last Republican administration in this state. His reference of property taxes only going up 1.9%. Speaker referenced it. He also doesn't talk about the billions of dollars in rebates that he cut to New Jersey taxpayers that goes to that property tax burden. My most troubling comment that he talks about the pension is there was true pension reform. We all deserve credit for that, Governor Christie as well. The failure is in not living up to the legislation that we all signed and passed. His failure to pay it is as criminal as the governors that came before him. The reality is that this governor started off and talked at length about the crisis of the pension and what it costs to taxpayers, and that it is special interest of 800,000 residents of the state of New Jersey. Not one of those people made a campaign contribution that we know of. You know what they did? They went up, they got up, they went to work every day, and they did what they were supposed to do. In his speech, he paid tribute to a remarkable teacher in a charter school. Charter school teachers get up and they go to work and they do the same job that NJEA members do, and many of them have the option to join that union. He talks about a promise that was made and the benefits and what they're worth to teachers at the end of their career, $2.4 million. He ignores the fact that teachers chose a career that was dedicated to public service in return for a pension and a retirement. It was an inducement. We have an opportunity to change that if we want. We can take away benefits and we can take away pensions. We're going to have to pay them more because otherwise they will choose careers that will allow them to save for retirement and protect and take care of their family. The governor ultimately, though, did what he criticizes every other governor of doing. He outlined why the pension is so expensive. He talked about how it's unaffordable. He talked about all the things that we won't be able to do if we pay the pension. And then in his very next breath, he decided that we're going to double down and spend more money on coaches for substance abuse. Wonderful initiative. How much is it and where are you going to get the money? He's going to get it from not paying the pension. He then talked about how he's going to reopen a state prison and dedicate it solely to substance abuse and drug treatment. How much is it going to cost and how are you going to pay for it? He's going to pay for it by not paying the pension. He then talked about how he's going to take $100 million and create a new program for substance abuse and drug treatment. He didn't talk about where he's going to get the money, but we know that's going to come from not paying the pension. He then talked about how we're going to create 3 accountable care organizations around the state and provide world-class health care to people with drug abuse and physical needs and medical needs. And we're going to do it by reducing readmissions to hospitals, and we're going to save money. But while he's going to do that, he's going to take away health benefits from 800,000 New Jerseyans. So basically, as I outline what the governor is attempting to do, while all the while taking $400 million out of the budget by eliminating inheritance and estate tax that we have talked about as part of a greater initiative of rebuilding our economy. His plan seems to be to take care of 800,000 New Jersey public workers, police, fire, and teachers. I guess he hopes they get addicted to substance abuse so that we can move them into housing in a state prison and give them world-class health care at an ACO. The reality is, ladies and gentlemen, we have an obligation to these people. And the only reason why we are now talking about a constitutional amendment is because legislatively, when we bravely went out in a bipartisan fashion to fix it, he failed to make the payment. When they challenged it in the courts and they lost in litigation, he failed to make the payment. When we presented him budget after budget with full funded payments, none of which, by the way, increased the sales tax to 10%, none of which, by the way, increased income tax to 27%, those budgets fully funded the pension. He chose not to pay it because he had his own personal ambition and his own personal desires that were suited as governors before him to fulfill those immediate gratification as opposed to funding the pension. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are large ripple effects to this pension going under. Our economy has struggled. Our ability to borrow money has cost us more. It makes the Speaker's passion about funding Transportation Trust Fund more difficult because of the cost of borrowing money. The ripple effect on our economy from the failure to pay that pension is dramatic, and it must be paid. It is an obligation that must be fulfilled. And it doesn't have to be done with any of the doomsday scenarios that the governor preached to states outside of New Jersey in an attempt to look tough and fiscally responsible. All you need to do is look at New Jersey in comparison to our neighboring states. We are struggling economically. Our unemployment rate trails those states. Our job growth is below the average of those other states that surround us. And it is because of a failure for long-term public policy solutions. like investing in our transportation trust fund, investing in education, paying the bills that we owe, and ultimately having hard conversations about what is true policy reform. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm disappointed because I believe that we have opportunity to fix the economy of this state. If we elect to try to do it by demonizing and vilifying hardworking men and women who did nothing but get up and go to work, we will divide a state, much like, unfortunately, in the words of the prayer of Rabbi Cutler. We can find a way to do this together. And unfortunately, hopefully, we will find that peace without trying to break this down into Republican and Democrat and good versus bad. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Majority Leader. You stated it well. I just hope that New Jerseyans remember that we're all New Jerseyans. We all have a grit. We've all made the tough sacrifices over this governor's tenure in office. We all have given. We said do it better, do it better. This speaker has challenged us to work late, work hard. We worked throughout our entire tenure until 2:30 a.m. in the morning this morning, and then came back down here to work some more. We're not afraid of the hard work. We're not afraid to make the tough decisions. We're not afraid to be inclusive in that decision making. We have competing priorities. We're pitting public education against charter education. We're not fully funding public education. We have strings attached. I'm from the city of Patterson, an urban district, 25-year state takeover that is failing and has millions of dollars squandered when we talk about where the relief is coming from. We're ready to work towards solutions. That's why we're here. That's why we're here day in out to make that happen. So I thank this leadership team that I'm a part of. I look forward to continuing the fight and the property tax issues. Again, I hail from the city of Patterson. Over a 50% increase in a 5-year period. It's a sacrifice to live in the cities. It's less than 2,000 people who do not have homes. Over 2,000 people do not have homes. So there's a homeless rate that's also impacting our state that we're not addressing. So we're pushing us over the edge. So we really need a governor, someone who's going to be here to work towards these solutions, not just give us sound bites. And it's time for us to find a governor who's going to work with us to relieve some of the pressures.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Majority Leader, Conference Chair. Let me reaffirm and echo what you've already heard, but doing it using two of the governor's phrases themselves, if I may. Number one, he stated we must confront our problems. I think that if one looks at the state of affairs currently in New Jersey from an economic point of view, as we've heard, most especially the Transportation Trust Fund, K through 12, as well as college education, college university, we'll find that there is a crisis, an economic crisis going on right now that is simply not being spoken of by the administration. The second thing the governor said, amongst other things, was we cannot shirk our responsibilities. We have been waiting diligently, we've been waiting patiently as a legislature for the governor to respond to many of these crises, and unfortunately that has not been the case. We know that he is obviously preoccupied in terms of running for the Republican nomination. Nonetheless, that should not prevent him from doing something which he himself said he was very capable of doing, and I believe not to be denigrating in any way, shape, or form. I believe he spoke about walking and chewing gum. We would hope that he would be able to do so in New Jersey in terms of recognition of the problems that, in fact, we've been encountering. I think that we all laud many of the initiatives that the governor spoke about, the $100 million more for substance abuse, closing of a state prison, $1.7 million for life coach funding to 6 new counties. The question, of course, that one would raise with the governor is, well, where are these funds coming from? Because we know that our borrowing rates are increased from 3.1 to 3.9 billion as a result of continued borrowing by the state without any new revenue being generated. Numbers are coming in positively, but they are still relatively flat, and the kind of increases that would be needed to pay for just these programs does not seem evident at this time. The governor's mention of changes to estate or inheritance tax, I think from many of our points of view would be welcome and certainly worth discussion. And under our leadership, we look forward to those discussions. But again, the question becomes between the 350 to 375 million ramification of that item, not to mention the inheritance tax itself, which represents the same amount of money, give or take, what is the source for that revenue that's coming about? It is wonderful to be able to speak in glittering generalities, which the governor has indeed perfected, but the question becomes, in terms of dollars and cents, how effectively, how in reality are these costs going to be met? The governor spoke in very glowing terms about New Jersey is strong and getting stronger, and New Jersey is strong and getting stronger. There is no doubt about that. But in order to accomplish those things which all of us would like to accomplish on both sides of the aisle, from all geographies, in so many cases, resources are required, and those resources simply are not forthcoming, and they were not forthcoming in the governor's address this afternoon. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Take some questions. Yeah, Kevin.
How surprised were you that the TTF wasn't even mentioned, and what was it that you wanted to hear?
Listen, we wanted to hear if he had some ideas, some plans. He laid out frameworks for other things he wanted to do. This one, he knows is a priority, and you know that we've been talking about it for the last year. It comes at the end of this fiscal year, no more money, and that actually, when you talk about 260 million of those funds go to municipalities, that could mean a tax hike to those municipalities. So listen, very disappointing, because that I think is priority number one, and we have talked about it on many, many occasions. So that should have been a big component of his speech. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, in theory, at least, the governor was in the room with the Senate President and the Speaker of the Assembly yesterday, hammering out this deal on casinos. Did the TTF come up at all?
No,
or was it just a one-note song?
If you were outside, we came in to sort of make an announcement. We had been talking about getting this done, and I would tell you, as I had said to many people that are in this room, the world didn't end yesterday. There was another session coming about, and we can get it done in this one. And obviously, that's what we came out to talk about yesterday. But no, we didn't talk about anything else because we had very limited time with the governor. We had spoken on the phone, but again, he needs to focus here. Obviously, he actually took some shots, I guess, at President Obama, which I imagine he's going to be focusing on what he's going to have as a rebuttal for that. He needs to focus on New Jersey.
Is it fair to say that without him, there is no deal on the TTF?
Well, of course not. You know, it really takes three to tango on this one. The Senate President, myself, we're very close on what the framework of it is. We would like a long-term solution that it has a right mix of borrowing and pay-go. Now we will need to see what he wants to accomplish. We had put on the table phasing out the estate tax. He called today about getting rid of the estate tax. That is not possible. As the budget chairman told you, it's about 400 million into the budget. And we need to figure out how we're going to do this. You need to have some fairness. If he would have talked about the earned income tax credit, that he was going to double it, then I would have told you that's something people can come around, because that is for the people that need it the most. And this, if you move the bar up, you will take care of that middle class that he was talking about.
Did his warnings on the cost of the pension and the possible results of passing them then give you any pause? Are you definitely going forward with that?
That we're going forward to it because there has been no willingness to pay for it. It's left at the end. It's the low-hanging fruit that he, as the majority leader talked about, takes money to pay other stuff. In that resolution, there is a framework of 5 years, quarterly payments to take advantage of it, so it adds more value to it. And when you talk about the pension, and he talks about the greatest payments that are being made, under this administration, over $17 billion have not been paid in, while the employees have paid over $9 billion into the fund during that same period of time. And we have not come nowhere close to that. So that's why this is on to see if we can get it done. And like the majority leader also said, we have funded it time and time again without raising any of those taxes, and it's been fully funded.
So what would you do if there's a revenue crisis like there was 2 years ago, where over 2 years in the budget you have a $2 billion hole, and now you have this pension amendment that says every quarter you got to make these large payments? How If that would be raised taxes, what does that look like?
It's a fair assessment, but as I said to you, remember, the payments that we have scheduled, and if you look at the schedule, they're just as incremental as what he's been paying on a lower scale than he was supposed to on the seventh payment. So obviously, we expect the economy to get better, because we have not bounced back as quickly. Now he's talking about construction, something that I come from my world. Yeah, it's getting better in the state of New Jersey, and that's why we're being optimistic. And then we will have to look at that and look at the structure of everything else, and hopefully we'll have somebody else in the executive branch that then we can take a look at, you know, how all the departments work, because under this administration, they lapse between $600 and $800 million every year, and we don't have control of that.
You know, if I can just add one thing to that too. The governor's lack of creativity on public policy is part of why we are struggling economically. So the failure to make the pension payment is because we have not been thinking outside the box. We've not invested in transportation trust fund like Pennsylvania did and seen a rebirth in their economy. We have to start to do different things. Now, we have seen success. The Economic Opportunity Act has led to construction permits and the opportunity of growth in that industry. The work done yesterday in a bipartisan fashion on gaming will help grow the economy. We need to take those revenues and dedicate them as our economy grows to pay the pension. We can't just take every penny of that and continue to fund other obligations. Those are the mistakes of the past that got us to the point where we are today.
On the estate tax, since you've talked about this before, what were your ideas about how to phase out? How would you deal with the loss of revenue on the estate tax?
Well, the way it would be that it has been framed out, right now the threshold is very low. It's $675,000. And he's right, once you hit, there's a cliff. Once you hit that number, you go paying back from $1. What has been talked about is maybe raising it to $1 million, then raising it to $2 million the following year, and phasing it up to eventually get it to the federal level of $5.4 million, or eventually trying to phase it out. But the way it's done right now, you really would create a $400 million hole that, as the majority leader says, he's spending money for other things, taking away revenues. How do you pay for it? We also did yesterday a constitutional amendment to make sure we dedicate all the transportation trust funds. So we're not going to be taking that money and using it anywhere else. We need that money to be invested, and that is going to spur the economy on a bubble up effect, because that will put a lot of jobs on the street, and hopefully it'll get us going.
So you're saying the impact in the way you just described by phasing it out, I mean,
Yeah.
you would still be losing revenue.
Right, but it would be at a smaller rate, so you'll be able to absorb the blow.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Go ahead, we'll give you the last one.
Does the Assembly leadership and do you support Senator Sweeney has introduced a bill, legislation that would allow the state to potentially take over Atlantic City's government? Where do you stand on that? And
I have not made a decision yet. I actually saw the bill yesterday. I have to look further into it to see what the ramifications and what the implications of that bill. So I have not made up my mind yet.
Are you guys getting along a little bit better now?
I always get along better. Have you heard me say anything? And as I tell everybody here, sometimes a little mirror on the right side of the car says objects are closer than they appear. Things are not what it appears. So sometimes you guys read too much of what's in the papers, and you guys should know yourselves. Some of that is sometimes rhetoric too.
Newspapers.
It goes to print.